The Alpha King's greatest beast was supposed to die before midnight. By the time the last light disappeared behind Frostvale's frozen mountains, Auron could no longer lift his head. The enormous white wolf lay on the cold stone floor of the royal chamber, his silver eyes half closed, his once powerful chest rising and falling
Step away
in
from the
painful,
beast!
uneven breaths.
By order of the king!
Blood had soaked the fur beneath his ribs. 6 royal healers had tried everything they knew. None of it had worked.
We are safe
the king
now.
had already been warned. Auron would not see morning. Then, just before the chamber doors were sealed for the night, a young woman walked inside. She carried no medicine, no magic, no weapon, only a worn wool cloak and a wooden bucket meant for cleaning the blood from the floor. Her name was Elara. She was a servant no one at court remembered. But when she looked into Auron's dying eyes, she stopped. Something in that gaze felt strangely familiar, almost like a plea. Ignoring the guards, Elara slowly lowered herself beside the enormous wolf. Then she did something no healer had thought to try. She began to sing. It was an old lullaby her mother had taught her as a child, a song from the forgotten forests beyond the kingdom. Auron's breathing changed. The king, standing unseen in the darkness beyond the doorway, noticed it immediately. For the first time that night, the dying beast became still. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Elara kept singing. And shortly before dawn, when everyone believed Auron had already taken his final breath, Elara suddenly felt something move beneath her trembling hand. She stopped singing. Her face went pale, because beneath the dying wolf's blood-soaked fur, something had just moved. And then she heard it. The faintest heartbeat. A heartbeat that should not have been there. Auron wasn't fighting to stay alive for himself. He was protecting a life the entire kingdom believed had been extinct for more than 100 years. Frostvale had forgotten what a gentle winter felt like. For nearly 3 months, snow had covered the mountains so deeply that the highest pine branches bent beneath its weight. The rivers running through the valleys had frozen from bank to bank, their dark water trapped beneath thick sheets of ice. Smoke rose from village chimneys every morning, and by afternoon it disappeared into a sky the color of old silver. Even the wolves had moved lower into the forests. But that morning, something had come down from the northern mountains that made every wolf in Frostvale fall silent. Auron, the great white guardian, had returned alone. He had appeared just after sunrise on the eastern road, staggering through the snow with one side of his body darkened by blood. A farmer tending his horses had seen him first. At a distance, the creature had looked like a piece of the mountain itself moving through the storm. Then Auron collapsed. By the time the royal riders reached him, his enormous paws were buried in the snow, his breath barely visible in the freezing air. They carried him back to Frostvale Castle. That was when the healers discovered the wound. It was deep. Too deep. Something had torn through the flesh beneath his ribs, leaving a jagged injury that stretched almost the length of a man's forearm. There were no tracks around the place where he had fallen except Auron's own. No dead animal. No enemy. No broken weapon. Nothing that explained what had happened. King Kael had stood beside him throughout the examination. He had not spoken much. He did not need to. Everyone in the chamber knew what Auron meant to him. The wolf had been there before Kael wore a crown. Before the royal seal had been pressed into his hand. Before the castle servants bowed when he entered a room. Auron had been beside him when he was only a boy. Kael had been 12 the first time he saw him. He remembered that day even now. A winter storm had trapped the young prince beyond the northern hunting grounds. His horse had panicked, throwing him into a snowbank, and for hours he had wandered through the trees with blood running from his forehead. He had been certain he was going to die. Then a pair of silver eyes appeared between the pines. Auron had been younger then, still enormous, still white, but not yet the legendary guardian everyone would later fear. The wolf had simply stood there, watching. Kael had expected teeth. Instead, Auron had turned and walked away. After a moment, the boy followed. The wolf led him back to the road. That had been the beginning. Over the years, Auron had saved Kael more than once. He had warned him of ambushes, found him when he was lost, stood beside him during battles. And when Kael became king, Auron had remained at his side without ever needing a command. The bond between them had never required words, which was why, now, Kael could not accept the sight before him. Auron lay motionless on a bed of thick blankets. His eyes were closed. His breathing was shallow. The oldest royal healer pressed both hands against the wound and frowned. More pressure. Another healer whispered. It won't matter. Then use the moonroot. We already did. Try the silverleaf. Already gone. Kael turned. Stop. The healers fell silent. The king looked at them one by one. Tell me the truth. No one answered immediately. Outside, wind struck the windows. The sound rolled through the chamber like distant thunder. Finally, the oldest healer lowered his hands. We have done everything. Kael's face hardened. Everything. Everything we know. The healer's voice became quieter. He may not survive the night. Kael looked at Auron. For several seconds he said nothing. Then he walked to the wolf and knelt. His hand rested against the white fur between Auron's ears. The fur was cold. Too cold. Auron. One silver eye opened. Kael swallowed. I am here. The eye closed again. That was all. But Kael remained there. He stayed until the fire burned low. He stayed until the healers left. He stayed until the soldiers outside the chamber changed shifts. And somewhere below the castle, Elara was still working. She had no idea that before sunrise, her life was going to change. She had arrived at Frostvale Castle 6 years earlier with one small bag and a coat too thin for mountain winters. Her mother had died during the first deep freeze of that year. After the burial, there had been nothing left in Pine Hollow for Elara. No home. No money. No. Have you ever spoken to him? No. Then why does he look at you like that? Elara had no answer. She looked at Auron. The wolf's silver eyes remained on her. I think he's scared. Kael's brow furrowed. Of what? She slowly looked toward the blood beneath his ribs. I don't know. Auron shifted. Barely. Elara watched the movement. Something about it seemed wrong. Not simply painful. Protective. His foreleg had moved slightly across his lower body, as if he were covering something. Elara stepped closer. Kael looked at her. What is it? She did not answer. She crouched beside Auron. May I? Kael hesitated, then nodded. Elara slowly reached toward the wolf. Her fingers hovered over the fur near his ribs. Auron watched her. Then, unexpectedly, he relaxed. Her hand touched him. Warm fur. Slow heartbeat. Elara closed her eyes. For a few seconds, there was nothing. Then, a faint movement. She opened her eyes. Her breath caught. She waited. Perhaps she had imagined it. Then it came again. A tiny flutter beneath Auron's side. Elara pulled her hand back. Kael stared at her. What? She looked at him. Her face had gone pale. I felt something. Kael leaned closer. His heartbeat. Elara shook her head. No. Another tiny movement pressed against Auron's body. This time Kael saw it. His expression changed completely. The room fell silent. Auron slowly opened his eyes. And for the first time since he had returned from the northern mountains, the dying beast raised his head. Not because he was stronger. Not because he was healed. But because whatever was hidden beneath his white fur had moved again. Kael looked at Elara. Elara looked at Auron. Neither of them understood what they had just discovered. But somewhere beneath the great wolf's trembling body, something alive was waiting for morning. And whatever it was, Auron had nearly died protecting it. For several seconds, nobody moved. The fire cracked softly in the hearth. Snow whispered against the windows. And beneath Auron's enormous body, something moved again. A tiny pressure. A faint flutter. Then nothing. King Kael stared at the place where he had seen it. His face had lost all color. Again, he whispered. Elara didn't answer. She was afraid to breathe. Auron lowered his head slowly back onto the blankets, but his silver eyes remained open. Elara placed her hand against his fur once more. This time she waited. The heartbeat beneath her palm was not Auron's. His heartbeat was deep and slow, heavy enough that she could feel it through his ribs. This was different. Smaller.
Faster.
Alive. Elara's lips parted. There's a pup. Kael looked at her. A what? She swallowed. A pup. The king stared at her as though she had spoken another language. Elara carefully moved her hand. He's carrying one. Kael looked toward the healer's table. Get them. A guard rushed from the room. Within moments, the chamber filled again. The oldest healer approached with disbelief written across his face. What happened? Kael pointed toward Auron. Examine him. The healer knelt. He placed both hands beneath the wolf's ribs. Nothing. Then his fingers moved slightly. His eyes widened. He tried again. Auron growled. It was weak. Barely more than a vibration. But the healer immediately withdrew his hands. He's protecting something. Can you tell what? The healer looked at Kael.
No.
Try. The healer hesitated. Then he reached toward Auron again. This time Elara moved closer. Slowly. The healer glanced at her. Do you know what you're doing?
No.
Then perhaps you should step away. Auron's lips lifted. The sound that came from him was low and warning. The healer froze. Elara looked at Auron. It's all right. The wolf's lip lowered. The healer stared at her. Kael noticed. So, did everyone else? Let her stay, the king said. The examination continued. Warm cloths were placed over Auron's ribs. The healers listened, measured his breathing, pressed carefully around the wound. Then the oldest physician finally sat back. His hands were trembling. Majesty. What? There is a second heartbeat. Kael closed his eyes. For a moment, the room seemed to disappear. The king looked at Auron, then at Elara.
How?
The physician shook his head. I don't know. How could you not know? Because this should have been impossible. He examined the swollen area again. The wound concealed it. Kael's voice became quiet. Is the pup alive? The healer did not answer immediately. Then he nodded. Yes. Elara released a breath she had not realized she was holding. Auron's eyes closed. His head sank deeper into the blanket. For the first time that night, there was something resembling hope in the room. But it lasted only seconds. The physician's expression darkened. The pup is alive now. Kael caught the change in his voice.
Now.
The healer looked toward Auron. The mother is too weak. Kael frowned. Mother? The healer glanced at the enormous wolf. Auron is female. Silence. Elara stared. Kael stared. Even the guards looked confused. For 18 years, everyone in Frostvale had called Auron a male. The wolf had always been spoken of as the king's guardian beast. The strongest wolf in the kingdom. The beast who had fought beside soldiers. The beast whose presence alone could send raiders running. But now they understood something they had never known. Auron was not simply dying. She was trying to give birth. And she had been hiding the pregnancy beneath her own body. Elara looked down at her. The great white wolf's sides trembled with every breath. How long? The healer's face tightened. Not long. How long? Perhaps a few hours. Kael looked at the windows. The sky beyond them was black. Snow continued falling. Can you save her? The healer's silence answered first. Then he said, we may be able to save the pup. Kael's expression hardened. And Auron? The physician lowered his gaze. We cannot promise both. Elara felt something tighten in her chest. She looked at the wolf. Auron had protected that tiny life all the way back from the northern wilderness. Whatever had happened there, she had chosen to keep moving. Through snow, through blood, through pain, until she reached the castle, until she knew her pup was somewhere safe. And now she was running out of strength. Elara sat beside her again. She began humming. The healer looked at her. What are you doing? Helping her breathe. He almost laughed. But then he saw Auron's chest begin to rise more slowly. He said nothing. King Kael watched Elara for a long time. There was something about the girl that unsettled him. Not because she was threatening. Because she wasn't. Everyone in his court wanted something. Nobles wanted land. Soldiers wanted honor. Merchants wanted protection. Advisors wanted influence. Even healers wanted recognition. But this woman wanted nothing. She had simply sat beside a dying animal and sung. Kael walked toward the fire. Keep the room warm. A guard added another log. Flames climbed the stone. Elara stayed beside Auron. Hours seemed to pass. The castle grew quiet. The servants disappeared. The guards changed. The healers remained. And Elara continued singing. Sometimes the words faded into humming. Sometimes she stopped to give Auron water. Sometimes she simply rested her hand against the wolf's neck. Auron never resisted. Once, during the darkest part of the night, her enormous head shifted. Her nose touched Elara's wrist. Elara closed her eyes. She remembered her mother. A small wooden house. Rain against the roof. A fire burning low. Her mother's voice, singing that same melody. Never sang that song outside the forest. Elara had been 8 years old. Why? Her mother had looked at her for a long time. Because some things listen. Elara had laughed. Now she didn't. She opened her eyes. Auron was watching her. And for one strange moment, Elara thought the wolf understood every word. The door opened. Lord Varick entered. He was a tall man with narrow features and dark hair beginning to gray at the temples. He dressed perfectly even during storms, his black coat always clean, his silver clasp always polished. He had served 3 kings. He had survived 2 wars. And he had never been known to make a decision without asking what he would gain from it. His gaze immediately moved toward Auron. Then the physician. Then Elara. What have you discovered? Kael looked at him. Nothing that concerns the court. Varick's eyes narrowed. Majesty, if the royal guardian dies. I said it does not concern the court. Varick bowed. Of course. But his eyes remained on Auron. He had heard enough. Auron was carrying a pup. And not an ordinary pup. Varick knew the old legends. Every educated noble did. The Moonfang. Guardian wolves said to have protected Frostvale before the first stone of the castle had been laid. According to the oldest stories, a Moonfang could recognize the true protector of the kingdom. They were not controlled by crowns. They did not obey armies. They chose. And if one was born again, the creature could change the balance of power within the kingdom. Varick's gaze moved to Elara. The servant was still singing. He wondered why. Then he left. The moment the door closed, Kael looked at the physician. You know what he heard. The healer nodded. Unfortunately, Kael's expression hardened. No one leaves this room without my permission. But it was already too late. Varick had returned to his private chambers. 2 guards were waiting outside. Find the girl. They bowed. The laundress? Yes. Why? Varick turned toward the window. Beyond the glass, snow covered the kingdom. Because she is standing between us and something that could change everything. The guards exchanged a glance. And if she refuses? Varick looked back. Then remove her. Back in Auron's chamber, Elara felt the pup move again. This time, the movement was weaker. She pressed her palm gently against the wolf. Stay with me. Auron's eyes opened. Elara leaned closer. You've come this far. The wolf's breath trembled. You can't stop now. Kael heard the words. He looked at Elara. You speak to her as if she understands. Elara looked down. Maybe she does. Kael almost smiled. Do you believe animals understand us? My mother did. Your mother? Elara nodded. She knew things about animals. What kind of things? Elara hesitated. Things the court would call foolish. Kael stepped closer. Try me. Elara looked at the fire. My mother said animals remember kindness longer than people do. Kael said nothing. Elara continued. She said they forget titles. They forget clothes. They forget who owns what land. But they remember the hand that didn't hurt them when it could have. Kael looked toward Auron. The wolf's eyes were closed again. For some reason, the words stayed with him. He had spent most of his life surrounded by people who feared his crown. Yet this woman spoke to a dying beast as though its life mattered simply because it was alive. Not because it was royal. Not because it was powerful. Not because it could protect her. Simply because it was suffering. Outside, the wind grew louder. The storm had arrived. Snow struck the windows so hard that the glass rattled. The castle guards began closing the outer gates. Kael ordered more wood brought to the chamber. Elara built a small nest beneath Auron's body using blankets and pine moss from the healer's stores. The physician protested. She needs to remain still. Elara shook her head. She's too cold. The fever is the problem. Then why are her paws freezing? The physician stopped. He checked. Elara was right. Auron's body was burning beneath her fur, but her paws were cold. The healer looked at her differently. You've seen this before? No. Then how did you know? Elara shook her head. I didn't. She simply touched Auron's paw. It was cold. So she warmed it. Sometimes knowledge was nothing more complicated than noticing what everyone else had stopped seeing. For the next hour, the room became a strange place of quiet work. The fire was kept alive. Water was warmed. Blankets were changed. Auron's breathing was watched. And Elara sang. She did not know that beyond the chamber doors, whispers were spreading. The king's beast was dying. The servant had touched him. The servant had bewitched him. The servant knew forbidden magic. By midnight, half the castle had heard some version of the rumor. By 1 a.m, Lord Varick had made certain the rumor reached the royal court. But inside the chamber, none of that mattered. Auron was struggling. Her breathing had become faster. The pup moved again, then stopped. Elara felt her blood run cold. She pressed her hand against Auron's side. Nothing. She waited. Nothing. Auron. The wolf opened her eyes. Elara looked toward the physician. Why isn't it moving? He came quickly. His hands went to the wolf's ribs. His expression changed. The heartbeat is weaker. How weak? He listened.
Too weak. Kael stood.
What does that mean? The physician looked at him. It means we may lose the pup before morning. Elara looked at Auron. The wolf was exhausted. Her eyes were half closed.
But there was still something in them.
A refusal. A promise. Elara lowered her forehead against Auron's neck. I know. Her voice broke. I know you're tired. Auron breathed against her hair. I know. The king watched from a few steps away. He had seen men stand against armies. He had seen soldiers ride into impossible battles. He had seen people die without crying. But he had never seen courage like this. Not loud. Not proud. Just quiet. A woman sitting beside a dying wolf because she refused to leave. Then Auron suddenly tried to stand. Her front legs shook. She pushed herself upward. Elara moved back. Auron. The wolf rose halfway. Her back legs slipped. She nearly fell. Kael stepped forward. But Auron snarled. Not at him. At the darkness beyond the door. Her ears turned. Her entire body became tense. Everyone in the room froze. Auron was staring toward the entrance. Kael reached for his sword. The guards stepped into position. Nothing moved. Then, from the corridor, came the sound of footsteps.
Slow.
Measured. 2 pairs. Elara looked at the door. Auron's body lowered again. The wolf's eyes remained fixed on the entrance. Kael whispered, Who is out there? No answer. The footsteps stopped. Then the door opened. 2 guards entered. They bowed. Majesty. Kael's hand remained on his sword. What do you want? One guard looked toward Elara. Lord Varick has ordered the laundress removed. Elara stared. Kael's expression hardened. On whose authority? The guard swallowed. The king's advisor. I am the king. The guard lowered his eyes. Yes, Majesty. Auron's lips slowly lifted. A low growl rolled through the chamber. The pup moved. Only once. Then stopped. And Elara understood something that terrified her. The wolf wasn't angry because the guards were approaching her. Auron was afraid they were coming too close to the life beneath her ribs. She looked at Kael, then at the 2 guards, then back at Auron. The dying beast had spent all night protecting her unborn pup. And now someone inside the castle had decided that pup was worth killing for. The 2 guards stood just inside the doorway. Neither moved. Neither spoke. But Auron understood exactly what their presence meant. The enormous, white wolf slowly lifted her head from the blankets. Her breathing was ragged, and her body trembled from exhaustion. Yet the moment one of the guards took a single step toward Elara, a low growl rolled through the chamber. It was not loud.
It did not need to be.
The sound seemed to crawl along the stone floor. The nearest guard stopped. His hand moved instinctively toward his sword. King Kael noticed. "Take your hand away." The guard froze. "Majesty." "I said take your hand away." The soldier obeyed. Auron continued watching him. Her lips remained slightly lifted, revealing the tips of her teeth. Elara slowly stood.
"Please."
Kael looked at her. She shook her head. "Don't frighten her." One of the guards glanced at her. "She's a beast." Elara's eyes hardened. "She's dying." The words were quiet, but something in them made the guard look away. Kael stepped between them. "Who gave you the order?" "Lord Varick." "I did not." The guard lowered his head. "We were told the king's advisor had authority." Kael's voice became colder. "Then you were told wrong." The guard bowed. "Yes, Majesty. Leave." Both men turned. Auron's eyes followed them until the door closed. Only then did her head sink back onto the blankets. Kael waited. Then he looked at Elara. "You should not have spoken to a soldier like that." Elara looked down. "I'm sorry." "You don't sound sorry." She glanced toward Auron. "I'm sorry I frightened you." Kael almost smiled. The woman had forgotten she was speaking to the king. Again. He had spent his life surrounded by people who measured every word before allowing it out of their mouths. Elara simply said what she believed. Perhaps that was why Auron trusted her. Perhaps that was why he was beginning to trust her too. Kael walked toward the door. "I will deal with Varick." Elara looked up. "What about her?" Kael looked at Auron. "What about her?" "She needs help." "I know." "Then don't leave her alone." Kael studied her. "You think I should stay?"
"No."
Elara shook her head. "I think you should make sure the people who are supposed to help her actually do." The king was silent. Then he nodded. "Fair enough." He left. Elara returned to Auron. The chamber seemed quieter after he was gone. She sat beside the wolf. For several moments, neither moved. Then Auron slowly shifted her head until it rested beside Elara's knee. Elara's eyes filled with tears. "You really are stubborn." The wolf breathed softly. Elara placed her hand against the white fur. "You came all the way back here." Her fingers moved slowly. "You must have known." Auron's eyes closed. "You knew you couldn't make it." Elara's voice trembled. "But you came anyway." She looked toward the small movement beneath Auron's ribs. "Because of the pup." Auron's ear moved. Elara smiled sadly. "I understand." She did not know whether the wolf understood her words. But she needed to say them. Sometimes words were not meant to be understood. Sometimes they were meant to be heard. She began humming again. The familiar melody returned to the room. Slow.
Soft.
Almost fragile. Auron's breathing eased. Elara closed her eyes. For a moment, she was no longer in Frostvale Castle. She was back in Pine Hollow. She was 8 years old again. Snow was falling outside their little wooden house. Her mother was sitting beside the fire, mending a torn blanket. Elara was curled beneath it. Again, young Elara had whispered. Her mother smiled. "You'll never sleep if I keep singing." "I don't want to sleep." "Why?" "Because the wolves are outside." Her mother looked toward the window. A wolf howled in the distance. Then another answered. Her mother lowered the needle. "Listen carefully." Elara lifted her head. "To what?" "The spaces between the howls." The child frowned. "I don't hear anything." "Exactly." Her mother had smiled. "Sometimes the quiet is where the message is." The memory faded. Elara opened her eyes. Auron was watching her. She whispered, "My mother knew you." The words surprised even her. Auron's eyes remained fixed on her. "Not you." Elara touched the wolf's forehead. "You're kind." Auron blinked slowly. Elara remembered something else. A warning.
A song.
A sentence her mother had spoken only once. Never sing the last verse. Elara had never understood why. She had been too young. Her mother had simply said that some songs were meant to call things that should remain asleep. Elara had never sung the final verse. Not once. But now Auron's breathing was worsening. The pup's heartbeat was fading. The ordinary lullaby was no longer enough. The physician approached. He listened carefully. His face tightened. Her pulse is dropping. Elara looked at him. Can we help her? We are helping her.
No.
Elara shook her head. We are watching her die. The healer looked away. He had no answer. Elara looked at Auron. The wolf's eyes were closing. The tiny heartbeat beneath her ribs was almost gone. Elara remembered her mother's face. The old house. The warning. Never sing the last verse. She stood. The physician watched her. What are you doing? Elara looked toward the fire. I don't know. She took a breath. Then she began singing. The melody was different this time. Older.
Deeper.
The first notes were almost impossible to hear. The fire flickered. Auron's ears moved. Elara continued. The words came from somewhere inside her memory. She did not know their meaning.
She only knew the sound.
The song seemed to carry the feeling of a forest before sunrise. Snow beneath bare feet. Wind moving through pine branches. A mother calling her child home. A promise made beside a dying fire. Auron's breathing slowed. The physician stared. Stop. Elara didn't. Elara. She kept singing. The room grew colder. The flames in the hearth became strangely blue at their edges. The guards near the door looked at each other. Then Auron's body began to glow. Not brightly. At first, it was only a faint silver light beneath the fur. Then the light spread. Elara stopped singing. The last note disappeared. Silence. Auron opened her eyes. They were no longer simply silver. They looked almost white. The physician stepped backward. What is happening? Kael entered the chamber. He had heard the commotion. His eyes immediately went to Auron. What happened? No one answered. The king approached slowly. The silver light beneath Auron's ribs pulsed once. Then again. A tiny heartbeat. Stronger.
Faster. Alive.
Kael stared. Elara's hand trembled. The light suddenly moved beneath the wolf's fur. It gathered around one small shape. And for a single moment, the outline of a tiny paw could be seen beneath Auron's body. Kael whispered, Moonfang. The word escaped him before he realized he had spoken. Elara looked at him. What? Kael did not answer. The physician did. The old bloodline.
Kael turned.
Don't. But the healer could not stop. The Moonfang. The name seemed to change the room. Elara looked between them. What is a Moonfang? Kael's expression was unreadable. A story. The physician shook his head.
No.
He looked toward Auron. It was never only a story. The silver light faded. Auron collapsed again. Elara caught her head before it struck the floor. Auron. Kael rushed forward. The wolf was breathing.
Barely.
But the light was gone. The physician examined her. The pup is alive. Elara looked at him.
How?
I don't know.
Kael stood.
Explain. The physician wiped his hands. The old records say Moonfang blood responds to the old songs. Kael's eyes moved toward Elara. The songs. The healer nodded. The forest singers. Elara felt cold. My mother. The physician looked at her. Who is your mother? Elara swallowed. Her name was Mara. The healer's face changed. He knew the name. Kael noticed. You know her? The old physician nodded slowly. She was one of the last. The last what? Forest singers. Silence. Elara stepped backward. My mother never told me that. Perhaps she was protecting you. Kael looked toward Auron. From what? The healer lowered his voice. From people who believed those songs could command the Moonfang. Kael's face hardened. And can they?
No.
The healer looked at Elara. They don't command them. What do? They remind them. Of what? The healer looked at Auron. Home. No one spoke. Then a sound came from the corridor. A soft laugh.
Kael turned.
The door was closed. But Lord Varick was standing outside. He had heard enough. He returned to his chambers before anyone noticed. He closed the door. Then he walked to his desk. A single candle burned beside an old book. Varick opened it. The pages were yellow with age. He turned through drawings of wolves. One page showed a white wolf with a crescent mark on its chest. Beneath it was an old warning. The Moonfang shall rise when the crown has forgotten the cost of wearing it. Varick smiled. He had spent 20 years believing the old bloodline was dead. Now it was alive. And the person who could calm it was a servant girl. He closed the book, then called for his most trusted guard. The man entered. Yes, my lord. Varick looked toward the door. Tomorrow, there will be a pup. The guard nodded. What should we do? Varick's eyes were cold. Make sure it never reaches the king. Back in Auron's chamber, Elara sat beside the wolf. Kael remained near the fire. Neither spoke for several minutes. Finally, Kael said, "You should sleep." Elara shook her head. "I can't. You've been awake all night."
So has she.
Kael looked at Auron. "You think singing can save her?" Elara looked at the wolf. "I don't know." "Then why continue?" Elara's fingers moved through Auron's fur. "Because stopping won't help." Kael had no answer. The storm outside grew worse. Snow hammered the castle. The windows shook. The fire suddenly flickered, then went low. Elara looked toward it. "That's strange."
Kael stood.
A guard entered. "Majesty, the firewood stores are locked." "Then bring more." "We have." Kael frowned. "Bring it." The guard left. Elara touched Auron's paw.
It was cold again.
"Too cold. Something is wrong." Kael looked at her.
What?
The room. He felt it too. The temperature had dropped. The fire was dying. The physician checked the lamp. Someone opened the outer vents. Kael's eyes hardened.
Who?
Before anyone could answer, Auron suddenly shifted. Her breathing became rapid. Her claws pressed into the blankets. Then a sharp cry escaped her. Elara immediately moved closer. "She's starting." The physician rushed forward. "Move back." Elara shook her head.
No.
"She needs space." "She needs me." The physician looked at Kael. The king stared at Auron. Then he nodded. "Let her stay." Auron's body tightened. Another tremor moved through her. The pup was coming. But something was wrong. The physician's face turned pale. The position. Kael looked at him. "What?" "The pup isn't positioned correctly." Elara looked down. Auron's breathing became frantic. The storm roared outside. The fire burned lower. And somewhere beneath the castle, a door quietly opened. Lord Varick's men had begun moving, while Auron fought to bring new life into the world. Someone else was preparing to make sure that life never saw the morning. The first thing Elara noticed was the silence. Not the silence of the castle. That kind of silence was never complete. There were always footsteps somewhere beyond the walls, the crack of burning wood, the distant movement of servants, the groan of old timber beneath the winter wind. This silence was different. It lived inside Auron. The great white wolf had stopped struggling. She lay on her side beneath the blankets, her enormous body trembling with exhaustion, her paws pressed into the bedding as another contraction passed through her. The physician knelt beside her. His hands were steady, but his face was not. "The pup has turned." King Kael stepped closer. "Is that good?" The physician shook his head.
No.
Auron's claws dug into the blanket. Elara leaned down. "I'm here." The wolf opened her eyes. Those silver eyes found Elara immediately. The look in them was almost unbearable. She was frightened. Not of death. Of failing. Elara understood. "You've carried her this far." She stroked Auron's forehead. "You won't fail her now." The physician looked at Elara. "You don't know that."
No.
She looked back at the wolf. "But she does." Kael watched them. He had never seen anything like it. Auron had allowed soldiers to approach her wounds. She had accepted medicine. She had endured pain. But the only person who seemed able to make her breathe steadily was a poor servant who had entered the room carrying a bucket. Kael knelt. "Auron." The wolf's eyes moved toward him. "I am here too." For a moment, the old bond returned. Kael remembered the boy he had been. The wolf in the snow. The silver eyes. The road home. He placed his hand against Auron's neck. "I won't let them take her." Auron closed her eyes. Another contraction came. Elara could feel the wolf's muscles tighten beneath her palm. Then the pup moved. The silver light appeared again. Only this time, it was stronger. It spread beneath Auron's fur in thin lines, like moonlight traveling beneath ice. The physician stumbled backward. Majesty.
Kael looked.
What? Look. Auron's fur began to glow. Not all of it. Only the area surrounding the unborn pup. A shape appeared. A small crescent. Perfectly silver. Kael stared. The mark. The physician nodded. The Moonfang mark. Elara looked between them. What does it mean? Kael didn't answer. The physician did. It means the old bloodline isn't dead. Outside the castle, a wolf howled. Then another. Then another. The sound traveled across the mountains. Elara looked toward the window. Why are they doing that? The physician whispered. They can feel it.
Kael rose slowly.
Feel what? The birth. Another howl answered from the forest. Then another. Soon the mountains seemed alive. Wolves were calling from every direction. Auron lifted her head. For one brief moment, she looked stronger, almost like the creature everyone remembered. The silver light pulsed, then vanished. Auron collapsed. The physician caught her shoulder. Her strength is gone. Elara felt panic rise inside her. What do we do? Keep her alive.
How?
The physician looked at the medicines. I need the moonroot. Kael turned. Bring it. A guard hurried to the medicine table.
He stopped.
Majesty. What? The jar is empty. Kael's expression changed. Empty. It was full earlier. The physician searched the table. Where is the fever tincture?
Gone.
The willow bark?
Gone.
The silver leaf?
Gone.
Every medicine that might help Auron had disappeared. Elara looked toward Kael. Someone had taken them. The king understood at the same moment. Lock the castle. The guards moved. Kael's voice filled the room. No one leaves. But Varick was already moving through the lower corridors. He walked quickly, though never hurriedly. He carried a small leather bag. Inside were the medicines stolen from Auron's chamber. He had not intended to kill the wolf immediately. That would have been too obvious. He only needed to weaken her enough that the birth became impossible. Then he would offer himself as the man who could restore order. A dead guardian, a surviving pup, a frightened king, a kingdom looking for someone to guide it. Varick understood power. It rarely arrived through force. It arrived through desperation. He reached the lower staircase. 2 guards waited. Is she still inside? One nodded. Yes. Good. What about the king? Occupied. The guard hesitated. My lord, the pup. Varick looked at him. Will be mine before sunrise. The man swallowed. Why? Varick smiled faintly. Because everyone believes kings rule kingdoms. He touched the leather bag. They don't. He continued downward. Back in the chamber, Elara noticed Auron's breathing changing. Too fast. Too shallow. She placed both hands against the wolf. Stay. Auron's eyes opened. Elara began singing. The ordinary melody. The lullaby.
Slow. Soft. Steady.
Auron's breathing followed it. One breath. One note. Another breath. Another note. The physician watched. Then he whispered, It's working. Kael looked at him.
How?
I don't know. Elara did not hear them. She was focused entirely on Auron. The wolf's body was shaking. The pup was still trapped. Elara remembered her mother's hands. How they used to move across injured animals. Never forcing. Never rushing. Always waiting. Her mother had once told her that birth was not something you commanded. It was something you accompanied. Elara placed her hand near Auron's ribs. Come on. The wolf breathed. You're not alone. Auron's eyes closed. The room became quiet. Then, Auron cried out. The sound was terrible. It echoed through the stone chamber. Elara's eyes filled with tears. Kael stepped forward. The physician raised his hand. Wait. Another contraction. Another cry. Then silence. The physician checked. Not yet. Elara looked at Auron. The wolf's body had gone limp. Auron. No response. Auron. Elara pressed her hand against her neck. A heartbeat.
Weak.
But present. She bent down. You promised.
She didn't know why she said it.
But she needed the wolf to hear. You came home. Auron's ear moved. You crossed the mountains. Another breath. You survived the wound. Another. You protected her. Elara's voice broke. You don't get to stop now. The wolf opened her eyes. Elara began singing again. But this time, the melody changed. The forbidden song. The final verse. The one her mother had told her never to sing. Kael recognized the difference. What is that? Elara didn't stop. The song seemed to make the room itself listen. The fire rose. The wind outside died. The wolves beyond the walls became silent. Every creature in the forest seemed to pause. Elara's voice remained soft. But the sound traveled. Through stone. Through snow. Through the frozen mountain air. Auron's eyes became silver-white. The mark beneath her fur appeared again. This time, the crescent spread. Light gathered around the unborn pup. Kael stepped backward. The physician whispered a prayer. Then the castle bells rang.
Once. Twice.
3 times. No one had touched them. Kael looked toward the ceiling. The bells continued. Across Frostvale, people woke from sleep. Village dogs began barking. Horses stamped inside their stables. And every wolf in the northern forest lifted its head. The sound that followed was unlike anything Frostvale had heard in generations. A single howl, then hundreds. The entire mountain answered. Inside the castle, Auron gave another cry. The silver light suddenly exploded across the chamber. Elara shielded her face. When she opened her eyes, the room had changed. The frost on the windows was gone. The fire burned high. And on Auron's side, beneath the blood-stained fur, a perfect silver crescent was visible. The physician stared. She carries the mark. Kael looked at him. What does it mean? The old man swallowed. According to the oldest records. He looked at Elara. The Moonfang does not choose a king. Kael frowned. Then what does it choose? The physician's eyes moved toward the unborn pup. A guardian. Kael looked toward Auron. Guardian of what? The old man's voice became quieter. Of the kingdom. The words hung in the room. Then Auron collapsed. The silver light vanished. The wolf's body became still. Elara cried out. Auron. She placed both hands against her. Nothing. For one terrible second, there was no heartbeat. Kael froze. The physician looked at the wolf. Then reached for her neck. Nothing. Elara shook her head.
No.
The physician checked again. Still nothing. Elara's voice broke.
No.
She bent over the wolf. You can't. Kael turned away. He could not watch. He had watched his father die. He had watched friends fall in battle. But losing Auron felt different. This was the creature who had found him in the snow. The creature who had walked beside him when nobody else knew how to reach him. The creature who had stood between him and death. And now she was gone. Then, a tiny movement. Elara stopped. She lifted her head. The physician looked up. Another movement. Beneath Auron's body, a small paw pressed outward. The pup was still alive. Elara's tears fell onto Auron's fur. She's fighting. The physician moved closer. Yes. Kael returned. What do you need? The physician looked toward the door. Time. Kael nodded. You have it. But none of them knew that time was exactly what Varick intended to steal. Because beneath the castle, the advisor had reached the old royal archive. And inside that archive was the only surviving record describing how to control a Moonfang pup. Varick opened the ancient book. His fingers moved across the page. Then he found the passage. His smile disappeared. Because the final line was not what he expected. The Moonfang cannot be owned. It chooses whom it serves. Varick stared at the words. Then slowly turned the page. There was another passage. A passage about the forest singers. The people who could awaken the Moonfang bloodline. And beneath it was a name. Mara. Elara's mother. Varick's expression changed. He suddenly understood. Elara had not been chosen by accident. She had inherited something. something her mother had spent years hiding. And if Varick wanted the pup,
He would need Elara alive.
at least for a little longer. He closed the book, then heard footsteps approaching. He slipped the book beneath his coat. The door opened. One of his men entered. "My lord,
What?
the king has ordered the castle sealed." Varick nodded. "Then we have very little time. What should we do?" Varick looked toward the stairs. "Bring me the girl." Back upstairs, Elara was still beside Auron. The wolf had regained the faintest heartbeat. The pup moved, but weakly. Elara looked at Kael. "Someone took the medicine." "I know."
Who?
Kael's eyes hardened. "I don't know yet." Elara looked toward the door. "Someone wants her dead." Kael nodded. "And I intend to find out who." Auron suddenly growled. Everyone froze. Her eyes were open. She was staring toward the doorway. Elara followed her gaze. Nothing. Then they heard it. Footsteps. Coming closer.
Slow.
Several people. Kael drew his sword. The guards raised theirs. The physician stepped back. Elara placed herself beside Auron. The footsteps stopped outside. Silence. Then the door handle began to turn. Auron lifted her head. She was dying, barely able to breathe. Yet her lips pulled back from her teeth. The door opened, and Lord Varick stood there. Lord Varick stood in the doorway as though he had every right to be there. Snow clung to the shoulders of his black coat. His face was calm, almost gentle, but his eyes moved immediately to Auron, then to Elara, and finally to the king. Behind him stood 4 armed men. King Kael's sword remained drawn. "Leave." Varick did not move. "Majesty, I came because I was informed the beast is deteriorating." "Then you have been informed correctly." Varick glanced at the physicians. "Perhaps another treatment should be attempted." Kael's eyes narrowed. "We have already discussed this." "Yes." Varick's gaze returned to Auron. "And yet she is still alive." The words were quiet, but Elara heard what was hidden beneath them. Not concern. Disappointment. Auron heard it too. A low growl rolled from her chest. Varick's men shifted uneasily. Kael stepped forward. "Get out." Varick bowed slightly. "Of course." He turned, then stopped. His eyes landed on Elara. "You should come with me." Elara stared at him. "Why?" "The king has ordered the servants removed from the royal chamber." Kael's expression changed. "I gave no such order." Varick smiled. "Then perhaps I misunderstood." "You did." Kael pointed toward the corridor. "Leave." Varick bowed again. This time he obeyed.
The door closed.
Kael immediately turned to the guards. "Follow him." 2 soldiers rushed out. The physician looked toward Auron. "Majesty." Kael turned. The old man's face was pale. "Her heartbeat is getting weaker." Elara dropped beside Auron.
No.
She placed both hands against the wolf's neck. The pulse was faint, but there. "Stay with me." Auron's eyes opened. Elara leaned closer. "You hear me?" The wolf breathed. "You don't have to fight alone." Auron's gaze shifted toward Kael, then back to Elara. The king understood. She was asking Auron to trust them both. Kael lowered his sword, then knelt. His hand rested against the wolf's shoulder. "I am not leaving." Auron closed her eyes. Outside, thunder rolled over the mountains. The storm had become enormous. Snow struck the castle walls like handfuls of thrown stones. Then the lights in the corridor went out. The guard shouted.
Kael stood.
"What happened?" No answer. A moment later, a soldier burst into the room. "Majesty." "What?" "The lower gates have been opened." Kael's face hardened. "By whom?" "We don't know." "Where is Varick?" The soldier hesitated. "Gone." Kael looked toward the door. Of course. Varick had never intended to fight openly. He had intended to make the castle itself turn against its king. Kael looked at Elara. "Stay here." She shook her head. "I won't leave, Auron." "You may have to."
No.
The answer was immediate. Kael studied her. For once, he did not argue. He turned to the guards. "Seal this chamber." The soldiers moved into position. "If anyone enters without my command, stop them." The door closed. Elara returned to Auron. The physician was examining the wolf again. The pup is moving. Good. Not enough. Elara looked at him. What does that mean? The birth is still blocked. She looked toward Auron. The wolf was breathing hard. Her paws trembled. The physician lowered his voice. If we cannot correct the position, neither of them may survive. Elara closed her eyes. Her mother's voice returned. Do not force a frightened creature. Stay beside it. Let it know it isn't alone. Elara opened her eyes. We need to turn her. The physician looked at her. She is too weak. Then we help her. One wrong movement could kill the pup. Elara nodded. And doing nothing could kill both. The physician stared at her, then nodded. Together they prepared. Auron resisted at first. Her claws pressed into the blankets. Elara placed her forehead against the wolf's.
Easy.
Auron's breathing shook. I know. Elara stroked her fur. You don't have to trust the room. She glanced toward the physician. Just trust me. Auron slowly relaxed. They moved her carefully. The moment they adjusted her body, she cried out. Elara's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry. The wolf's paw moved. It touched Elara's wrist. The gesture was so gentle that Elara almost broke. She held the paw. I know. Outside the chamber, steel rang against steel. Kael had returned. His voice echoed through the corridor. Drop your weapons. Someone shouted. Then another clash. Elara looked toward the door. The physician whispered. He is buying us time. Elara looked back at Auron. Then we have to use it. The ancient song came back to her. She began singing. The physician looked at her. This was not the forbidden verse now. It was the lullaby. The first song. The one that had brought Auron peace. The melody moved slowly through the room. Auron breathed with it. One breath. One note. Another breath. Another note. The pup shifted. The physician's eyes widened. Again. Elara continued. Again, he whispered. Auron's body tightened. The pup moved. Then stopped. The physician placed his hands carefully. It's closer. Elara kept singing. The storm raged. The fire burned. Kael fought outside. And Auron pushed against the blankets. Another contraction. Another. The physician's voice became urgent. Now. Elara held Auron's head. Come on. The wolf strained. Her claws dug into the bedding. A tiny cry escaped her. Then silence. The physician stared. Wait. Elara stopped breathing. What's wrong? He leaned closer. I can see the pup. Hope entered the room.
Small.
Terrified. Fragile. Elara's eyes filled with tears. She's coming. Auron trembled. Easy. Elara kept singing. The pup moved another inch. Then another. Outside, the battle stopped. Kael appeared in the doorway. Blood marked his cheek. His sword was still in his hand, but his eyes were fixed on Auron. Is she? Not yet, the physician said. Kael entered. Behind him, the guards dragged two men into the corridor. Varick's men.
Kael looked at them.
Where is Varick? One man refused to answer. The other looked terrified. Lower archive. Kael's expression changed. The old records. He understood. Take them to the cells. Then he looked at Elara. Can you finish this? She looked at him. I don't know. Kael nodded. Then don't think about finishing. He looked at Auron. Just get her through the next moment. Elara nodded. The king stepped beside her. Auron's eyes opened. Kael placed his hand against her neck. I am here. Elara continued singing. The pup finally moved. The physician's hands trembled. Almost. Auron pushed. Her entire body shook. The pup's head appeared. Elara gasped. A tiny nose. Wet white fur. A small mouth opening and closing. The physician guided carefully. One more. Auron gave everything she had left. Then the pup slipped free. For 1 second, there was no sound. No movement. Nothing. Elara stared. The tiny creature lay in the physician's hands. It was impossibly small. Its fur was white. Pure white. A single silver crescent marked the center of its forehead. Elara's lips parted. Why isn't she crying? The physician rubbed the pup gently. Nothing. He tried again.
Still nothing.
Auron lifted her head. Her eyes found the pup. She tried to move. She couldn't. Elara reached toward the newborn. The pup's tiny body was cold. Please. She wrapped it in a warm cloth. Come on. The physician's face tightened. We need breath. Elara brought the pup close. She began singing. The same lullaby.
Soft.
Barely audible. The pup remained still. Auron watched. Elara's voice trembled. You came all this way. Nothing. You can't leave now. Still nothing. She pressed the pup gently against her chest. The little body remained cold. Elara's tears fell onto its fur.
Please.
Her voice broke. Your mother fought all night for you. Auron gave a weak sound. Elara looked toward her. She hasn't given up. The wolf's eyes were open. Elara looked back at the pup. Neither can you. She sang again. This time, the melody seemed to change. The room became still. The fire lowered. The wind stopped. Kael stared. A faint silver glow appeared beneath the pup's fur. The crescent on its forehead brightened. Then, a tiny breath. Elara froze. Another. The pup's mouth opened. A small cry escaped. It was barely louder than a whisper. But to Elara, it sounded like the entire world had begun again. She laughed through her tears. She's alive. The physician closed his eyes. Relief crossed his face. Kael smiled for the first time that night. But Auron was still lying motionless. Elara looked toward her. Auron. No response. The wolf's eyes slowly closed. Elara's smile disappeared. She touched her neck. Nothing. Her fingers moved again. Still nothing.
No.
Kael stepped closer. The physician checked. His face became grave. Elara shook her head. No. She leaned over Auron. You don't get to leave. The wolf did not move. You hear me? Silence. Elara's hands trembled. You promised. She knew the wolf had never promised anything. But it didn't matter. You fought for her. The pup gave another tiny cry. Elara held it closer. Look. Auron remained still. Your daughter is alive. Nothing. Kael turned away. His eyes were wet. He could not hide it. The physician lowered his head. Then, Auron breathed. One breath.
Weak.
Shallow. But real. Elara froze. Auron. Another breath. The wolf's eyes opened. Kael laughed once, almost in disbelief. The physician placed both hands over his face. Auron slowly turned her head. Her nose touched the pup. The newborn gave a tiny squeak. The great white wolf closed her eyes. Not in death. In peace. Elara began to cry. She lowered the pup beside her mother. The newborn crawled clumsily through the blanket. Its tiny paws pushed against Auron's fur. Then the silver crescent on its forehead began to glow. Auron's eyes opened. The pup pressed its nose against Elara's hand. The light traveled from the crescent into her palm. Elara gasped. For one heartbeat, the entire chamber filled with silver light.
Kael stared.
The physician whispered. It chose her. Elara looked at him. What? The Moonfang. He swallowed. It chose you. Before she could answer, a howl rose outside. Then another. Then hundreds. Every wolf in Frostvale answered. The sound rolled through the mountains. Villagers woke. Children ran to windows. Farmers stepped outside. Guards lowered their weapons. Even horses became still. Something ancient had returned. Inside the castle, Elara held the tiny pup against her chest. Auron watched them.
Alive. Barely.
But alive. Then the chamber door burst open. A guard stumbled inside. Majesty. Kael turned. What happened? We found Varick. Where? The lower archive. Kael's face hardened. And the guard swallowed. He had the old Moonfang records. Elara looked up. The guard continued. He was reading how to control the pup. Kael's hand closed around his sword. Where is he now? The guard looked toward the corridor. Escaping. Kael handed the newborn to Elara. Stay with Auron. Elara looked at him. Where are you going? To stop a man who believes everything in this kingdom can be owned.
He turned.
Then paused. His eyes met hers. Keep singing. Elara nodded. Kael disappeared into the corridor. Outside, the storm was still raging. But somewhere beyond the mountains, the first light of dawn had begun to touch the sky. And, for the first time in more than 100 years, a Moonfang pup had opened its eyes beneath the roof of Frostvale Castle. By the time King Kael reached the lower corridors, the castle no longer felt like the same place. The stone beneath his boots seemed to carry the distant howls of the wolves outside. Their voices rolled through Frostvale in long, haunting waves, rising from the forests and mountains as though the entire wilderness had awakened together. Kael moved quickly. 2 guards followed him. Behind them, the torches flickered in the draft. Seal the eastern passage, he ordered. 1 guard ran ahead. The archive. Find Varick. They reached the lower staircase. A trail of muddy footprints crossed the stone. Kael stopped. Varick had gone toward the old archive. He pushed open the heavy wooden door. The room beyond was dark. Shelves covered every wall. Ancient books rested beneath layers of dust. Old maps hung from wooden frames. At the center of the room stood a stone table. The Moonfang book was open upon it. Kael approached. The page showed a drawing of a white wolf with a silver crescent on its forehead. Beneath the drawing were several lines written in an ancient hand. The king read them. The Moonfang will not belong to crown or sword. It will follow the hand that protects without seeking reward. Kael stared at the words. Then he understood why Varick had wanted Elara. The pup could not be controlled. But perhaps the man who controlled the person the pup trusted could control the creature itself. Kael's jaw tightened. A sound came from the far end of the archive. A book falling. Kael turned. Varick. No answer. He moved between the shelves. Then he saw him. Lord Varick stood beside a narrow door hidden behind a curtain. He held a dagger in one hand. The old Moonfang book was tucked beneath his arm. You should have stayed upstairs, Varick said. Kael raised his sword. You betrayed me. Varick smiled. I served you. You stole medicine from my guardian. I removed medicine from a dying beast. You tried to kill her. Varick's smile disappeared. She is a relic. Kael stepped closer. She is family. The word surprised even him. Varick noticed. Family? Kael's eyes hardened. Yes. Varick shook his head. That is why you are weak. He opened the hidden door. Beyond it was a narrow passage leading toward the eastern side of the mountain. Snow blew through the opening. Kael understood immediately. You planned an escape. I planned for the moment when your kingdom needed a stronger hand. You mean yours. Someone must rule when the king loses his judgment. Kael raised his sword. I have made many mistakes. Varick smiled. And this is another. He threw a small glass vial onto the floor. Smoke exploded across the archive. The guards coughed. Kael covered his mouth. Through the smoke, Varick disappeared into the passage. Kael ran after him. The passage opened onto a narrow mountain ledge. Wind struck him immediately. Snow blinded him. Far below, black pine trees disappeared into the storm. Varick was already moving. Kael followed. The king's boots slipped. He caught himself against a stone. Varick looked back. You cannot save everyone, Kael. Kael continued forward. You don't know what I can save. Varick laughed. Then his foot slipped. For 1 second his body hung over the edge. Kael reached him. His hand caught Varick's wrist. Varick looked up. The king could have let go. The mountain would have ended the matter. Instead, Kael pulled. Varick stared at him. Why? Kael dragged him onto the ledge. Because I am not you. The guards arrived. They seized Varick. The advisor struggled. You'll regret this. Kael looked at him.
No. His voice was calm.
I regret trusting you. Varick was dragged away. Kael looked toward the sky. The storm was beginning to weaken. For the first time, a faint gray line appeared beyond the mountains.
Dawn.
He hurried back toward the castle. Upstairs, Elara had not moved. Auron lay surrounded by blankets. The newborn pup rested against her mother's side. The tiny creature had already fallen asleep. Elara watched every breath. One tiny rise. One tiny fall. She smiled through exhausted eyes. Auron opened hers. Elara leaned closer. She's beautiful. The great wolf looked toward the pup, then toward Elara. Her nose moved gently against the woman's hand. Elara laughed softly. You frightened me. Auron closed her eyes. The physician checked her pulse. She is weak. Elara looked at him, but alive. Yes. Can she recover? The physician hesitated. She survived something no animal should have survived. Elara looked at Auron. Then, maybe she will surprise us again. The physician smiled. I think she already has. The door opened. Kael entered. Elara looked up. His face was marked with snow. What happened? Varick is captured. Elara's shoulders relaxed. And the book. Kael held it up. I found it. The physician approached. What does it say? Kael looked at the old pages. That the Moonfang cannot be owned. Elara looked down at the pup. And Kael's eyes softened. It chooses. The pup stirred. A tiny paw emerged from beneath the blanket. Elara offered her finger. The paw closed around it. Kael watched. Something inside him shifted. He had spent years believing strength meant control. Control over soldiers. Control over borders.
Control over fear.
But now he understood something Auron had known all along. The strongest creatures were not always those who could dominate. Sometimes they were the ones who could trust. Kael walked closer. What will you name her? Elara looked at the pup. She thought of the storm, the silver light, the first breath, the dawn beginning beyond the mountains. Lyra. Kael smiled. Why? Because she was born from a song. The name settled over the room. Lyra. The tiny pup opened her eyes. They were pale silver. Elara froze. For a moment, the pup stared directly at her. Then she gave the smallest sound. A soft little whimper. Auron lifted her head. The pup crawled toward her. Auron lowered her nose. Mother and child touched. The chamber became quiet. No magic. No thunder. No glowing light. Just a mother and her newborn. And somehow that was more beautiful than anything else. Hours passed. The storm finally ended. Sunlight touched the mountains. Snow on the rooftops turned gold. The people of Frostvale gathered outside the castle. They had heard the howls. They had seen the silver light in the windows. They wanted answers. Kael stepped onto the fortress balcony. Below him, hundreds of people waited. Farmers, merchants,
Children.
soldiers, old women wrapped in wool, young men holding lanterns. The entire kingdom seemed to be there. Kael raised his hand. Silence spread. A guardian has been born. The crowd murmured. Kael continued. Not a weapon. The murmuring stopped. Not a possession. His eyes moved across the people. A guardian. Then the castle doors opened. Elara walked out carrying Lyra. Auron followed slowly behind her. The crowd fell silent. The enormous white wolf stepped into the sunlight. For the first time in days, she stood without collapsing. Her legs trembled, but she stood. Lyra rested against Elara's chest. The sunlight touched the silver crescent on the pup's forehead. The crowd gasped. Then every wolf surrounding Frostvale began howling. The sound filled the valley. Elara looked toward the mountains. Auron lifted her head and answered. Her howl was weaker than before, but it was still hers. Lyra opened her tiny mouth. A tiny howl came out. It was almost comical. Several children laughed. The tension broke. People smiled. Even the soldiers laughed softly. Kael stood behind Elara. He watched the pup try again. Another tiny howl. This time Auron answered. The mountains carried their voices. Elara smiled. She had arrived at the castle with nothing but a wool cloak. Now she stood before an entire kingdom holding the creature everyone had once believed would never be born.
But there was still one thing left.
Justice. Kael turned toward the guards. Bring Varick. The advisor was brought into the courtyard. His hands were bound. The crowd saw him. Whispers spread. Kael stepped forward. Lord Varick betrayed the crown. Varick looked around. You believe a servant over me? Kael's voice remained calm. I believe evidence. The guards brought forward the stolen medicines. Then the book. Then the testimony from the men Varick had ordered into the chamber. Every lie he had told was exposed. Varick looked toward Elara. His face twisted with anger. You destroyed everything. Elara said nothing. She simply held Lyra closer. Varick looked toward Kael. You'll regret choosing her. Kael stepped closer.
No.
He looked at Elara. I regret that it took me this long to see her. Varick was stripped of his title. His lands were taken. His name was removed from the royal council. And before sunset, he was sent into exile beyond the eastern border. Kael refused to execute him, not because Varick deserved mercy, but because the king wanted the law to matter more than his anger. When the gates closed behind Varick, Frostvale breathed again. The kingdom began to change. The old songs returned. The forest singers were no longer spoken of as witches or servants. Elara taught the children the melodies her mother had once whispered beside winter fires. She taught the healers how to listen before they touched an injured animal. She taught the royal guards that not every creature needed to be conquered. And she taught the kingdom something even more important. Kindness was not weakness. It was a form of courage. Weeks passed. Auron recovered slowly. She could walk, then run. At first, only a few steps. Then across the courtyard. Then through the forest. Lyra followed everywhere. The pup was fearless. She chased falling leaves, tumbled through snow, fell asleep beside the fire, and followed Elara whenever she walked beyond the castle walls. Kael watched from a distance. Their relationship changed quietly. There was no sudden declaration, no grand ceremony, no promise made beneath a moonlit sky. There were simply small moments. Kael bringing Elara a cup of warm tea when she forgot to eat. Elara reminding Kael to sleep after long council meetings. The king sitting beside her beneath the pines. The two of them watching Auron and Lyra run through the snow. One evening, Kael asked Elara about her mother. They sat beside a frozen stream. The sun was setting behind the mountains. Elara told him everything she remembered. The songs, the warnings, the little house, the winter nights, and the reason her mother had stopped singing the final verse. She had feared the royal court. She knew powerful men would try to use the Moonfang. So she had hidden the songs. She had hidden her daughter. She had hoped the old bloodline would remain asleep. But perhaps it had never been asleep. Perhaps it had simply been waiting. Kael looked toward Lyra. The pup was sleeping beside Auron. Your mother was protecting more than a secret. Elara looked at him. What was she protecting? Hope. Elara smiled. The first spring flowers appeared a month later. Small green shoots pushed through melting snow. Frostvale had not seen a spring this beautiful in years. The rivers began moving. Birds returned. The forests filled with sound. And on the first morning when the snow finally disappeared from the castle gardens, Elara walked beneath the trees. Tiny paws followed her. She turned. Lyra stood behind her. The pup tilted her head. Elara smiled. You followed me again. Lyra ran toward her. Elara knelt. The pup climbed into her
lap.
Auron watched from the hill. The great white wolf stood beneath the first green branches.
Strong, healthy, alive.
Kael approached Elara. He stopped beside her. For a moment, none of them spoke. Then Lyra gave a tiny howl. Auron answered. Kael laughed. Elara looked toward the mountains. The sound traveled farther than she expected. Children in the village heard it. Farmers stopped working. Families stepped outside. And soon the old song began again. First in one house, then another, then across the kingdom. People sang it when children were born. They sang it when someone returned home. They sang it when winter became difficult. They sang it whenever they needed to remember that something beautiful could survive even the darkest night. Years later, people would tell the story differently. Some would say the Moonfang pup had been a miracle. Others would say ancient magic had awakened. Some would say the wolves had chosen a new guardian. But Elara knew the truth. The miracle had begun long before the silver light. It had begun when a dying creature was left alone in a cold stone room, when everyone else had decided there was nothing more to be done. And one ordinary woman sat beside her. She had no crown,
No army.
no magic wand, no wealth. She had only a song. And she stayed. That was all. Sometimes that was enough. Auron lowered her head. Lyra pressed against her mother's side. Elara placed her hand over the pup's silver crescent. Kael stood beside her. Above them, the mountains shone beneath the morning sun. The kingdom that had once feared winter now welcomed spring. The beast everyone had expected to bury was running again. The pup everyone had wanted to control was free. And the forgotten song of the forest singers had become the song of an entire kingdom. Elara listened as Auron's deep howl rose into the sky. Then came Lyra's tiny answer. And beneath the green branches of spring, with sunlight warming the earth after the longest winter Frostvale could remember, Elara finally understood what her mother had meant all those years ago. Some things did listen. Not to power. Not to crowns. Not to fear. They listened to kindness. And sometimes, when the world had almost given up, kindness answered back.